Amid the bright lights and loud music that filled the auditorium, a black actress stood clutching her hopeful audition script in her hands. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the door of the casting office, where Saturday, the casting director, known for his cruelty and bias, with a glance at her, he opened his notepad without raising his eyes and said in a half voice, "I'm sorry. You're not a good fit." Like a stroke of thunder, those words fell upon her dreams. She felt the world around her crumble, her inner voice whispering, "You're not good enough." There was no hint of compassion in his voice, only cold disdain, as if her existence was only a burden. How could a talented actress be dismissed so quickly just because of the color of her skin? But when the casting director suddenly learned that she was the daughter of a world-famous director, his face changed, the aloofness disappeared, and in its place stood the harsh reality that racism and prejudice were not just words, but real obstacles to her dream. What happened next? How did the actress react to this humiliation? Dear viewers, we want to know your name and where you are watching this video from. Your comments are very important to us. They not only inspire our team, but also help to promote our channel. We appreciate every one of your support and every one of your voices. Write in the comments, you are incredibly important to us. The dark blue canvas of the sky was clouded over as the black actress approached the tall glass doors of the casting studio. Her soul was buzzing with hopes and dreams. She had come here to test herself, to prove to everyone that she was worthy of the role she had dreamed of all her life. She had big plans, and this audition could be her chance for success. She put on a brave smile, fixed her hair, and inhaled deeply, trying to overcome her excitement. Every step toward the door reminded her of all the hardships she'd faced, from the derogatory stares at college to the constant rejection of unimportant roles. But that was all behind her now. The opportunity to change her destiny lay ahead. When she entered the studio, the sounds of paper rustling and the quiet conversations of her colleagues enveloped her like old acquaintances. She could feel the energy boiling up inside her. The actresses, dressed in elegant outfits, looked at each other, discussing their chances of success. But there was fire in her eyes and confidence in her heart. "You'll get your way today," she whispered to herself as she waited for her turn. She took a quick glance around the casting room, trying to focus on her goals. However, as she waited, the tension was building. She noticed the casting director sitting behind the desk looking for actresses who were confident and fit his idea of the ideal. When her turn finally came, the actress was overcome with excitement. She stepped onto the bright podium, and the eyes of everyone present, including the casting director, stopped on her. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she tried not to show fear. The casting director leaned back in his chair, his cold gaze sweeping over her from head to toe. His face expressed not the slightest interest, only arrogance. "Are you sure you've come to the right place?" he pronounced with a dismissive grin. Her inner voice cried out, "Why do you judge me only by the color of my skin?" His words cut like a sharp knife. She knew she should go on, but the prejudice and hatred coming from him were becoming overwhelming. Feeling the dreams caving in, she gathered all her strength and spoke, "I'm here to show you my talent." But he only waved her away, continuing to write something down in his notebook, as if her dreams and hopes were nothing but superfluous words. At that moment, she realized that the fight wasn't over. Her heart clenched with resentment and anger, but at the same time, a spark of determination flared up. She was willing to fight for her dreams despite his contempt. The casting director looked up slowly, as if he needed time to realize who he was dealing with. His eyes, cold and impassive, fixed on the black actress who stood before him, ready to show her talent. But instead of expecting support, she met only arrogance hidden under a layer of professionalism. "So, you've come to this role," he said. His voice sounded like he was talking to a child who hadn't realized he couldn't play adult games. There was something demeaning in his tone that made her heart clench. She knew that in his eyes she wasn't an actress, just a black woman who didn't feed into his idea of a proper appearance. The casting director continued to stare absent-mindedly at her hair, braided into neat pigtails. "I don't think this style is right for the part. You do realize that we need something a little more traditional," he said, as if answering himself. The remark hurt her more than he could have imagined. He implied that her curly hair was not up to his standards, making her less acceptable to his worldview. The actress gathered all her courage. "I can change my style, but it won't make me any less talented," she said, trying to remain calm. But the casting director only snorted, his lips curving into a contemptuous grin. "Are you saying that talent can override a lack of aesthetics?" he added with a note of mockery. His words sounded like a sentence, as if he was deciding her fate before she could even begin to fulfill her role. The actress felt all the hopes she had gathered earlier begin to crumble. He continued to examine her critically, as if she were not a person but an object to be evaluated and discarded. At that moment, the room became overwhelmingly dark, and all her confidence began to blur into thin air. She understood that to him, her skin color wasn't just a characteristic. It was the reason he wasn't going to take the time to explore her talent. She'd heard of casting directors who thought black actresses couldn't play leading roles, weren't suited for high art. When he said, "I don't know how you even made it through the audition process. We're looking for someone who can really grab the audience's attention," she felt a cold chill run through her body. Every word he said was laden with racism. Every look was laced with contempt. Without giving in, she gathered her thoughts and decided she had to use this moment to her advantage. She wanted to show that she could be better than he thought. However, the casting director was leaving her no chance. His arrogance overwhelmed her, and every second stretched like an eternity. She knew she had to do a standout performance, but at the same time, a storm of fear and frustration raged in her soul. The actress stood in front of the casting director, feeling his evaluating gaze spreading her apart. She knew that her appearance was the main reason. He didn't want to give her a chance. His cold, merciless eyes slid over her face as if assessing every detail, and she could feel the anger boiling up in her soul. His thoughtless bias was making her vulnerable, and in that moment, she realized that her appearance wasn't just a part of her identity, but a battlefield on which she had to fight. "Do you realize that our movies demand certain standards?" he pronounced with obvious disdain. "You look not what we expect. Perhaps we should consider a lighter skin tone or something more, how shall we say, universal." His words pierced her like a sharp knife, as if her skin color and her natural beauty were something unacceptable, as if he was a judge, evaluating not only her looks but her right to dream. The actress, holding back tears, tried not to let herself be misled. She knew that such thoughts about race are too often imposed on black actresses who are trying to make their way in a world where they are rarely recognized. A storm of emotions raged inside her: resentment, anger, a sense of injustice, but outwardly she kept her composure. The casting director kept saying, "If you want to act in our movie, you're going to have to change your style. With hair like yours, you look like someone from a completely different industry. We can't afford to be associated with something that won't appeal to our target audience." His every word sounded like a loud signal that his ideas about beauty and talent had nothing to do with her reality. She knew that many black actresses face similar attitudes, and it wasn't the first time. She'd been trying to convince her that her natural beauty didn't fit the template. "You could try straight hair or maybe wear a wig," he continued, as if he was suggesting she give up her identity. Her heart filled with anger, but she knew it was important not to lose her self-respect in this struggle. "Why do I have to change to meet your standards?" she pronounced, trying to make her voice firm. "I can be myself and still be a great actress." Fury raged inside her, and she couldn't contain her feelings any longer. In response to her words, the casting director only grinned as if it was a joke, and his eyes rolled back to her hair. "Really? That's your argument? We have actors who feed the norm, and they are chosen for their style, for being able to grab the audience's attention. Don't you understand that? This industry is not for people like you." His words sounded like a verdict, devaluing all her efforts, all her hard work, all the years she had spent perfecting her craft. The actress stood there, realizing that this wasn't just a conversation about appearance, it was a demonstration of the systemic bias that exists in the industry. She felt her dignity threatened, and realized that every denial of her individuality was also a denial of her right to be a part of this world. But at the same time, she knew she couldn't afford to give up. This moment was to be not only her test, but also a symbol of the struggle of all those who had ever been undervalued because of their skin color. Gathering all her strength, she looked straight into the casting director's eyes and said, "I'm not going to change for you. I came here to show you what I can do, and I will do it despite your stereotypes." A fire was lit inside her, and she was ready to fight, even if her opponent stood in the heart of the casting industry. The door of the casting room opened with a quiet creak, and the actress stepped inside, full of hope, but with trepidation in her heart. The space was brightly lit, and there was an air of anticipation in the air. She stepped onto the podium, and at that moment, everything around her seemed to freeze. The casting director sat behind a large desk, his face hidden behind a notepad. But as she entered, he looked up and she met his cold eyes. That gaze was like an icy stream that burned her from the inside out. There was no hint of interest or friendliness in his eyes, only contempt and arrogance. She felt her confidence rapidly evaporating, leaving only fear and uncertainty. It was as if every inch of her skin was in the crosshairs, as if he were a judge who had already rendered his verdict. The casting director, smirking, said, "So, who are you and why are you here?" His voice sounded as if he expected her to explain why she, a black actress, had decided to try her luck at this casting call. "Tell me, what are you going to offer us besides your unusual appearance?" He continued, as if her skin color and her uniqueness were only flaws. With every word he said, the actress felt her heart begin to beat faster. "I've come to audition for a part I'm sure I can play," she said, trying to speak confidently despite her growing excitement. But his sneer betrayed that he wasn't going to take her seriously. "You realize this isn't a talent show, right? We need actors who meet certain standards. Do you really think there could be black people in this role? Our audience isn't ready for that," he added with obvious derision. It wasn't just a humiliation, it was another demonstration of the racism she'd encountered not for the first time. The actress gritted her teeth and tried to collect her thoughts. "My skin color does not determine my skill. I can play this role just like anyone else," she said, but her voice trembled with emotion. In response to her words, the casting director only snorted, as if her words were ridiculous and inappropriate. "Really? You think your words are going to change our minds? We have plenty of actors who look more attractive and meet expectations. Why should we choose you?" His words sounded like a deafening blow, knocking her off balance. She knew that such statements were not just about her, but about every black actor who had ever dreamed of their roles. Her inner voice, which had recently whispered of hope, was now full of fear. Fear that she might be rejected because of the color of her skin. Fear that her dreams would collapse under the pressure of racist stereotypes. But at the same time, a spark of determination was igniting in her soul. She couldn't let this man break her. Taking a deep breath, the actress took a step forward, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "I'm not asking you to accept me. I am here to show you that I am worthy of this role, and I won't let your preconceived notions destroy my dreams," she said with a firmness that surprised even herself. But the casting director only grinned, and his sneer burned her again. She knew she was facing not just one man, but a system in which racism was an everyday reality. And the knowledge filled her with determination. She would fight on, even though she was up against not only this casting director, but the entire world that often turned a blind eye to talent because of the color of their skin. The actress stood at the podium, full of determination and fear, but the casting director continued to ignore her as if she were a mere shadow, not worthy of attention. She felt a wave of frustration rise in her chest as he leaned back in his chair and continued to stare at his notes, not showing the slightest interest in her presence. "You can't just come here and expect us to rave about your skills," he pronounced, his voice sounding indifferent, like he was talking about the weather. "We're looking for those who can attract attention, and unfortunately, you don't meet our standards." He didn't even seem to notice that she was holding a portfolio that held all of her endeavors, all of her roles and accomplishments. The actress, gritting her teeth, tried to get his attention. "Look at my portfolio. I've worked in several plays and even had small roles in TV series. I can't show you that I am worthy of the role," she uttered, but his response was nothing but mockery. He didn't even bother to look at her portfolio, as if it were a superfluous attribute that didn't deserve his attention. "So, tell me how your little experience can compete with the names we want on the screen," he continued with disdain. Every word he said was a blow, and the actress felt her dreams begin to crumble. His arrogance reflected not only his personal opinion, but also the systemic stereotypes that have influenced black actors in the industry for decades. The casting director seemed to relish his position. "I'm sure there are many like you who think they can get a role simply because they have a dream, but the reality is that our audiences only want to see faces that they understand, that don't make them uncomfortable. Don't you realize that they're not ready to see someone like you on screen? With each word he spoke, a sense of helplessness grew in her heart. She knew that these weren't just words, this was the cruel reality that many black actors faced. Their talents were ignored, as if their skin color was an unacceptable element in this world. "But you don't know me. You haven't even seen what I'm capable of," she pronounced, trying to hold back tears. "I came here not only as a black woman, but as an actress who is willing to work and succeed." His face remained impassive, however, and that was most painful. In his eyes, she saw only a stereotype, not a person capable of appreciating talent. The casting director finally looked up at her and his eyes met hers. "Why would I look at your portfolio when I can already see at a glance that you don't fit our vision? We're looking for actresses who will look attractive on screen, and unfortunately, your looks don't match that." Those words pierced her like a stabbing blow. She felt her dreams shattering against the wall of racism that was unoppressed. Her efforts, her labor, all the hours she had spent working on her craft, were meaningless in this man's eyes. The actress, gathering all her resolve, said, "You can't ignore talent just because of the way I look. I deserve a chance to prove that I can play any role." But her words only fueled his arrogance. "You still don't get it. It's not just about what you can do. It's about how you look and how you're perceived. If you don't realize you're out of place, maybe you should consider looking for something more suited to you," he said with a sneer. Her determination ran into the wall of prejudice again, and in that moment she realized that for him, her skin color and her style were insurmountable barriers. She realized that her struggle was not only her personal story, but the story of all black actors who fight every day against a system that doesn't want to see their talents. She decided she wasn't going to let this arrogant man break her. Her dreams were on the line, and she knew she had to fight for them despite his disgust and hatred. The actress was getting ready for her talent to finally be appreciated, but instead the casting director continued to bombard her with a stream of derogatory comments, as if his goal was to destroy her confidence permanently. His cold, cynical stare made her feel even more vulnerable, as if she were standing on a crucifix, and every word he said was another nail driven into her self-esteem. "Do you think you can handle the role with your skills and, more importantly, your looks?" he pronounced with obvious disdain. "People don't want to see someone who looks like you on screen. I don't want to offend anyone, but you have to realize that not all roles are made for someone like you." His voice was drenched in arrogance, and malice sparkled in his eyes, as if she would not just be an actress, but some sort of vicious mockery of the industry. Every word he said pierced her heart. She could feel the lump in her throat growing and tears welling up in her eyes. He continued without noticing her pain. "Look at yourself. You don't look like someone we can work with. With a face like that and hair like that, you can't qualify for serious roles. Even if you were talented, which I think is highly doubtful, your looks will still be a distraction to the audience." The actress clenched her fists and tried to hold back her anger and humiliation. These words were not just criticism. They were a clear example of racism that penetrated every cell of her body. It wasn't just hatred of her appearance. It was a denial of her identity, her culture, her right to be on stage. She felt that his insults were taking away not only her strength, but also her hope. "You should be grateful you were given the opportunity to come here at all," he continued, raising an eyebrow. "Don't forget that other, more suitable candidates are waiting in line. Don't you realize you don't stand a chance?" Her heart was racing, but in that humiliation she found a spark of determination. "I'm not going to give up because of your preconceived notions. I came here to show what I can do, and I believe in my talent, even if you can't see it," she said, her voice sounding a firm note amidst the chaos. The casting director grinned, as if her words were just an amusing joke. "And what are you going to do with this talent? Blow us away with your acting? That's not going to work. Audiences don't want to see black people in roles that require depth and complex emotions. They want to see those who look like them and have more sympathetic features. You don't stand a chance." Her eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't allow herself to break down. Every comment he made was not only an attack on her, but on every black person who had ever suffered from bias in the industry. Anger flared in her heart, and she knew she had to speak up not only for herself, but for those who couldn't speak up, for those who had always remained in the shadows. "I'm not afraid of your words. I know what I can do. I didn't come here to meet your expectations, but to show you that talent doesn't depend on the color of your skin," she said with an expression of determination that surprised even herself. but the casting director just kept turning his head, as if she was just a comedy act on his show. You still wouldn't understand. Maybe if you lightened your hair a bit and, say, chose a different style of dress, that would at least help. But even then, I wouldn't recommend you get your hopes up too high. This is an industry where I decide who gets to be on stage. And unfortunately, you don't meet any of my standards. Her heart was breaking, but in that moment, she realized she didn't have to give in to his arrogance. This wasn't just her battle, it was the battle of everyone who had ever felt unappreciated because of skin color or looks. And despite all this humiliation, she was ready to fight to the end. Standing in front of the casting director, the actress felt his every derogatory word, his every taunt squeezing her inside like a metal grip that wouldn't let her breathe. Her mind was filled with thoughts that kept her in suspense. She wasn't just an actress. She was a black woman in a world where prejudice was firmly entrenched and where appearances determined destinies. Why should I feel like I'm being judged not for what I can do, but for how I look? She thought, looking at the casting director whose arrogance overwhelmed the room. Why, instead of appreciating my talent, does he choose to use his stereotypes as a weapon against me? Why does society still prioritize looks over intelligence and sense? Her inner monologue was becoming more vivid with each passing second. She remembered her friends and acquaintances who also faced similar insults. How many times have I heard people deny a job because they didn't meet someone's standards? How many times have we had to hear ourselves compared to the images on the screen, where skin color, not talent, decides everything? These thoughts rolled in like waves, engulfing her. She knew the world wasn't always fair. She had dreams, and those dreams had nothing to do with her race or appearance. She wanted to act, wanted to show people that talent had no color. But how hard it is to break through the darkness when society continues to judge on first impressions, instead of considering individuality. Why can't he see me for who I am? Why must I fight not only for my part, but for the right to be on this stage, to be taken seriously? The thoughts tormented her, and excitement filled her heart. Every word he says is not only an insult to me, it's an insult to every black woman who has ever felt that their place in our world is misplaced. She remembered her first steps into the theater, when her skin color was not a barrier, when she could simply be an actress and not a black actress. It was a time when she could trust that her talent would be appreciated without reservation. But since then, she has faced a system that has created barriers in her path. These hidden biases permeate the entire industry. They're not always open and obvious, but their influence is felt in every corner. She pondered, and this deliberate train of thought gave her strength. I can't let his opinion become my verdict. I have to fight for my identity and the right to represent myself. She knew that this casting director was just one face in an endless line of people who don't realize that behind appearances lies individuality. I have to believe in myself. I have to believe in my abilities, despite what he thinks, she decided, gathering the remnants of her confidence. Her inner voice sounded louder and louder. I deserve a chance to show what I can do. I will fight not only for myself, but for all those who can voice their opinions. I will represent all black actors who face this injustice every day. Despite the humiliation and prejudice, she felt a flame ignite within her. It was a flame of determination and pride that wouldn't let her give up. I can do this. I have to do it, she decided, and her fear began to recede, giving way to strength and confidence. She looked into the casting director's eyes, ready to keep fighting. He may not see her talent, but she knew she had the power to change that opinion. And not just for herself, but for anyone who has ever felt unappreciated and unnoticed in this world. The actress slowly left the casting studio, and every step seemed heavy, as if she was dragging behind her the weight of all her dreams and hopes. Her heart was devastated, and a feeling of utter hopelessness was spreading in her chest. She realized that the encounter with the casting director had been more than just a disappointment. It had been a real trauma that had left a deep mark on her soul. How can this be? I put all my energy, my faith, my soul into this, she thought on her way out. In her mind, she could still hear his demeaning words. You're not right. You won't be attractive on the screen. Don't you understand? Each of those statements was like a knife stabbing through her dreams, and she felt her surroundings begin to darken. Outside, a cold air enveloped her, but it did nothing to dispel her despondency. She stopped, breathing in the fresh air, but even it couldn't push the thought of how her skin color was a stumbling block to her dream out of her head. The stares of passers-by, their disregard, and the invisible barriers of society pressed down on her. Why should I fight for something that comes so easily to others? She asked herself. Sniffling, why is my desire for art, my desire to prove myself, perceived as a threat? Her thoughts were filled with anger and frustration. But, at the same time, she knew that this was not just her personal story. It was a testament to the struggles of all those who have ever felt unacceptable. She remembered her friends who had tried to break into the industry. Many of them had already given up, lost faith in themselves because of such humiliation and prejudice. Is this really my destiny? To always be rejected? To always remain in the shadows? My heart clenched with despair. But at that moment, a spark arose in her mind. No, I can't give up. I can't let this casting director determine my future. She suddenly screamed to herself, and that scream echoed in her soul. My dreams are worth more than his biased opinion. I must keep fighting, not for him, but for myself and everyone else who has ever felt out of place. Clenching her fists, she felt the power rising in her. She wasn't going to leave this world without leaving a mark. It was important for the actress to remember that every rejection was not the end, but just another opportunity for growth. A realization matured in her heart. Her struggle was just beginning. The actress took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air filling her lungs, giving her strength. She remembered her loved ones, how they had supported her along the way, how they believed in her talent even when she herself doubted. I am not alone. I'm part of something bigger. She reassured herself, and the thought gave her strength. With determination in her eyes, she took a step forward, ready for the next stage of her journey. She didn't have a plan, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't stop there. She would return to this casting studio, but another time she would be armed with experience, knowledge, and the lessons life had given her. I will fight not only for my dreams, but for those who cannot fight for themselves, she thought, feeling her heart fill with new hope. Yes, her dreams were shattered today, but in their place, a new fire was emerging, a fire of determination. The actress would be back, and this time she wouldn't let anyone make her feel unworthy. Walking down the sidewalk, the actress was once again immersed in her thoughts about the difficulties she had faced throughout her career. Each step echoed in her mind as a reminder of how difficult it was to make her way in a world that by default was set against her. She thought about every rejection, every derogatory look, every insulting comment that seemed to be predetermined by her race. How could I have been so naive? She wondered. I thought that if I worked hard and honed my talent, someone would definitely notice me, but instead, they only turn me away, as if I'm something unworthy that gets in the way of their perfect image. Her thoughts went back to the day she had first come to the audition. She remembered trembling with excitement, believing that her hard work and talent could change someone's point of view. But now, years later, she realized that this path was full of constant obstacles. Her dreams and efforts were often devalued by biases that could not be hidden, even behind the smiles of those in the industry. I've encountered racism at every turn, but I didn't think it would be this scary, she reflected, recalling her first experience on set, where her casting agent first tried to convince her to change her image. You should lighten your hair a little, he advised, as if that was the only thing that could help her break into the industry. Maybe you should pick a more traditional role, so you don't scare the producers. She increasingly heard comments like this one from her coworkers and agents, who insisted that she adapt to meet the standards. Why should I change for anyone? She raged, walking past a storefront window that reflected her own dissatisfaction. Every audition and every casting session became a test for her, in which she had to prove her worth not only as an actress, but also as a human being. She knew that other actors who don't face prejudice just go on stage and play their roles without worrying about how they look. In her case, appearance was always a topic of discussion, and she had to hear about how her skin color didn't match the ideals of the industry. I'm tired of these standards. I'm tired of being judged on looks and not talent. Her anger flared as she recalled all the obstacles she had to overcome. She recalled how other actresses who had succeeded often shared their stories of how they had to work twice as hard to get noticed, how they sometimes found a role only after changing their style or hair color. But none of this could break her spirit. Despite all the pain and humiliation, the actress knew that's what made her stronger. Every time I face racism, I will gain a new understanding and determination. I can't let it destroy me, she thought as she walked past the places she once dreamed of being. She recalled her acting classes, where she learned not only how to act, but also how to remain resilient in the face of prejudice. Every rehearsal, every assignment was full of not only acting skills, but also a continuous struggle against inner fears and external prejudices. I should use my experiences to inspire others. I have to show people that we all deserve a chance. A thought occurred to her. This intuition gave her the confidence that she had the power to change not only her own destiny, but also the destinies of others. The actress was determined that her dreams would not be shattered. She realized that the road to success would be full of challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on. Every struggle is an opportunity for growth, and I will do whatever it takes to prove my worth. I am not alone, and I will fight for everyone who needs support. It wasn't just her journey, it was a fight for equality, for the right to be heard and seen, and she was up for the challenge. The actress went outside, but her thoughts continued to wander like clouds in the sky, full of uncertainty and tension. She was pacing along the sidewalk when suddenly, turning a corner, she bumped into another actress. The woman she bumped into looked just like her, tired but determined. "Oh, I'm sorry," shrieked the actress, trying to apologize and walk away quickly, but the other woman stopped her. "That's okay. I see you're having a rough day too," she said with a slight smile that seemed to try to dispel the dark clouds hanging over them both. The actress, stopping, felt curiosity overwhelm her. "Yes, that's right. I was just at a casting call. Well, you know how it is," she admitted, feeling the heaviness that had built up in her soul begin to slowly recede. "I've had a day like that too," the woman replied, her voice filled with understanding. "I just went through a similar situation. Every time I think something has changed, I run into the same old prejudice." The actress felt her heart beat faster. This woman seemed to be able to understand her pain. "How are you coping with this?" "I feel like I'm losing hope," she confessed, and you could hear the vulnerability in her voice. The woman looked at her sympathetically. "You know, I thought I couldn't handle it either, but I started looking for support among other actors who were going through the same things. We create communities where we can share our stories, support each other, and raise our voices," she said, as if she was passing on a ray of hope. "I always thought it was just me alone," the actress said, "but now I realize it's a problem for a lot of people." She recalled her colleagues who also faced bias, and her heart was filled with gratitude for this unexpected encounter. The woman continued, "I once went to a casting call where they bluntly told me that I had the wrong skin color for the role. They didn't even give me a chance to showcase my talent. I felt absolutely destroyed, but then I decided that I wasn't going to let them determine who I should be." Admiring the courage of this actress, our heroine felt a surge of energy. "How did you find the strength to continue?" "I realized that my experience was not just my struggle, but part of something bigger. I started taking part in actions for equality in the industry, and now I know that my story can inspire others. We all need to come together and fight for change." Her eyes shone with determination. Those words became like a spark that lit a fire in the actress' soul. "I need to do something like this," she thought. She felt her own struggle take on a new meaning. "You know, I always thought I had to fight alone," she admitted, "but now I realize that we need to come together and support each other." The woman nodded. "Quite right. And when we unite our voices, we can make a difference. I hope that one day our dreams of equality will become a reality, and we will see more black actors on screen." They exchanged contacts and promised to keep in touch. "Let's meet and discuss how we can help each other," the woman suggested, and her kindness filled the actress's heart with warmth. Saying goodbye, the actress felt that this meeting was not accidental. It was like a sign that she was not alone, that there were like-minded people ready to fight for equality and justice. With every word and every shared experience, she felt her confidence begin to grow, and despite all the difficulties, the fire of hope was once again burning in her heart. This unexpected meeting inspired her to do something new, and she knew that the road to success would be difficult, but now she was not alone. Together with others as strong as she was, they would be able to break through the barriers. After an unexpected encounter with another actress, a new spark of hope was ignited in the heart of the protagonist. She walked down the street with the realization that the fight for her dreams didn't have to be a solitary one. Her support and like-minded people became essential. There was a feeling inside her that they could join forces and do something more than just fight for their roles. The next morning, she gathered her thoughts and decided to text her new acquaintance. She couldn't wait to chat again, to exchange ideas and discuss how they could work together to support each other in this cruel world of show business. "Hi, it's me, the actress you met yesterday. I wanted to talk about how we can unite to make our struggle more visible," she wrote in the message. The sense of unity overwhelmed her, and it became the foundation for new hope. The woman quickly replied, "Hi, I'm so glad you wrote. I feel like we can do something important. Let's meet and talk about how we can support each other." They agreed to meet in a cozy coffee shop in the city center, where the atmosphere was conducive to open and honest conversations. When the protagonist entered the coffee shop, she saw her new friend already waiting for her at the table. In her eyes shone understanding and support, and this gave the actress confidence. "I think the most important thing is to create a community," she began, and her voice sounded confident. "We can organize group meetings where other actors can share their stories, get advice, and just support each other. We'll have the opportunity to perform together to make a difference in the industry." The actress listened intently and nodded, picking up on her ideas. "Yes, that's a great idea. We can create an online group to unite actors from all over the country. Maybe we can even have a rally or protest to bring attention to the problems Black actors face." In that moment, both actresses felt their dreams and hopes connect to form a powerful flow of energy. They realized that behind their words was something more, a common struggle for equality and justice, for the place they should rightfully occupy in the industry. "It seems to me that the more people we get involved in our initiative, the more likely we are to be heard," one of them remarked. "We can create not only a support group, but also a platform for visibility. We need to remind the world that talent has no color." The coffee on the table was getting cold, but their conversation was gaining momentum. They began to develop a plan of action, discussing the possibilities of organizing meetings, creating a website and social media to help bring like-minded people together. Every word they spoke was filled with determination and purpose, and soon they began to see their vision become a reality. In that moment, the protagonist realized that the power of their solidarity would be the engine of change. Not only would they support each other, but they would open doors for many others who suffer from prejudice and inequality. It will be a movement that will not stop until it reaches its goal. The next day, determined, they organized the first meeting. Not only Black actors came to the room, but many others who had faced bias in various forms. Each shared their story, and everyone began to realize that together they could create a powerful voice that would not be ignored. There was a sense of unity in this community, as if each of them had become part of one big family. Together they were able to overcome fears and show that their struggle was not only for their individual dreams, but also for the right of all actors to be heard. Their work together brought hope and inspiration, and soon more and more people started coming to their meetings. They started using social media to promote their ideas, and soon their initiative went viral, attracting media and public attention. This force of solidarity, support, inspiration, and a united voice was the beginning of a new era for the actress and her comrades. They realized that their struggle was just beginning, but now they were not alone. Together they could change the industry, break down barriers, and show that talent exists in everyone, regardless of skin color. As the community of actresses grew and became more active, stories began to surface that affected not only the main character, but many others who had encountered the same casting director. News of his bias and racist views began to spread among the actors like a wave crashing on the shore. The community they created became a place where people could share their experiences, and soon everyone began to realize that their stories were not the only ones. One day at a meeting, one of the participants raised her hand and talked about her horrific experience. She recalled how, when she arrived at the audition, the casting director stated to her, "You don't look the way I imagined you would," and dismissed her without even allowing her to perform her scene. "He only cared about how I looked, not what I had to offer as an actress," she shared, her voice shaking with anger and resentment. With each new story, more and more participants began to connect, and soon there was a buzz in the room. It was a collected anger and frustration. Each case confirmed that this casting director was not just a lone case of bias. He embodied a system that refused to recognize talent beyond its limited standards. Other actresses shared their memories of being pushed away, of having their bright dreams shattered by the harsh realities of the casting world. I came to the casting call full of hope, and when I walked in, he looked at me and immediately said, "We don't have any roles for your type." I couldn't believe my ears. I walked out and tears ran down my cheeks, said another actress, her face covered with determination. The story touched the hearts of everyone present, and the atmosphere became heated. The actresses began to realize that if they united their voices and opened the public's eyes to racism and bias in the industry, they could make people hear them. The anger that had been building up became the engine of their actions. We have to turn to the media to speak out about his horrible attitudes and practices. It's not just our personal stories, it's a systemic problem we all face, exclaimed one participant. Applause filled the room and the inspiration was contagious. They decided to start a campaign to bring attention to the casting director and his biased methods. Each actress in the community wrote a story, and these posts came together as a powerful video that they decided to post online. They began publishing the posts on social media with a hashtag that quickly went viral, Biased. It was only a few days before their video went viral. New and old faces facing bias began commenting, supporting their movement. It became not only an expression of pain, but also of unity. A community of actors outside of their small circle began sharing their own stories of racism and bias in casting. Meanwhile, the casting director, realizing that his reputation was in jeopardy, began to panic. His social media profile was blocked after a wave of negative comments, and producers began to question his working methods. Some of them even started refusing to work with him, realizing that such a reputation could affect their own image. The actress community began to gather information about his actions, and soon they had plenty of evidence of his bias. A scandal erupted both inside and outside the industry. Reports of his racist views began to appear in the news, and journalists were eager to find out the truth. At this time, the protagonists realized that their actions had taken on a scale they had never imagined. Now their struggle had become a social movement, and every day more and more people were joining their cause. They weren't just telling their stories, they were advocating for change that could become a reality. It was the beginning of the end for the casting director, whose preconceived notions soon came under scrutiny. The reputation he had built over the years was beginning to crack, and it soon became clear that his days in the position were numbered. Every day, the movement against bias and racism in the industry grew stronger. The protagonist couldn't take her eyes off the news that appeared online, and with each new post, her resolve grew. She felt that this was no longer just her personal struggle, it was now a movement for justice for all those who faced the same obstacles. One day, looking through old articles and interviews about casting directors, she came across some unexpected facts. Several articles discussed cases where actresses who didn't fit this man's ideal were publicly humiliated at auditions. With each word she read, her anger and frustration grew. He was always looking for just one picture, one standard, and those that didn't fit his limitations were just thrown away like unwanted things. She whispered to herself, feeling the desire for justice boiling up inside her. She began collecting all the evidence and stories she could find. Members of her movement actively responded to, sending their personal experiences. She was shocked to find that they not only had her own stories, but also the writings of other actresses who may never have had the chance to voice their experiences. The actress realized that she had an opportunity to create something important. A plan was maturing inside her to compile all of this evidence into one document that could be used to file a complaint against the casting director. But she didn't want it to become just a formal complaint. She wanted to make their stories heard. She made a list of actresses who were willing to support her, and soon they had a meeting. Everyone gathered in a council room where they could quietly discuss the plan of action. Each of them shared their experiences, and with every word, the room was filled with determination and unity. We need to tell the world what is happening within these walls. We need to bring all of our stories together to show that these are not just single cases, but a systemic problem, she pronounced with fire in her eyes. Our goal is to get justice, not just for us, but for all future actors who may face the same thing. Her words had an effect. The other actresses nodded, and the same fire that burned in the heart of the protagonist was lit in their eyes. They began discussing how they could pitch their stories to local news outlets and social platforms. We have to make our voice heard, one of them said, her confidence inspiring everyone. The protagonist grabbed her phone and started recording. Each of us has to present our story. We can create a video in which each of us talks about our experiences, so that people realize how painful and humiliating it really is, she suggested. The conversation became more and more animated, and soon they created a plan. Their confidence grew by the minute, and each actress felt that she could say what she had been silent about for a long time. They agreed on a time and place to record the video, and soon it became not only their project, but a way of life. Several days passed, and finally, the day of recording arrived. They gathered in a small studio space where each actress could speak in front of the camera and share their story. Their fears, worries, and pain filled the space, and each of them felt the support of the others as they took the stage. The spotlight was blinding, but against this background, each story sounded stronger and brighter. When the protagonist stood in front of the camera, her voice trembled, but she was confident inside. She shared her worries about casting, how her talent was ignored, how her appearance was an obstacle to her dreams. "I'm not just here for me, but for anyone who has ever faced bias," she finished, and her words became a mantra for everyone. When all the stories were recorded, they felt that this was just the beginning. They decided to edit a video so that everyone could see how racism and bias impacted the lives of talented actors. And when that video aired, they knew the world would not be able to remain indifferent to their pain. A sense of triumph was building up inside the protagonist. She realized that their actions could change the situation not only for them, but also for future generations of actors. This revealed truth was the first step towards justice, and she was ready to fight to the end. At the moment when the protagonist and her allies edited the video and published it on social media, they could not have imagined how high profile it would be. Their voices, full of pain and struggle, reached a wide audience, and soon media attention turned to the casting director. His bias and racist views came under the public spotlight. A few days passed, and like a thunderclap, the news came. The casting director was summoned to a meeting with the producers to explain his actions. All this time, the protagonist felt that something was going to happen to this man, some kind of collision that would change everything. Meanwhile, there was a nervous atmosphere in the casting studio. The casting director, once confident in his power and authority, was now depressed. His reputation was crumbling before his eyes, and every day he received more and more calls from producers who questioned his professional qualities. A wave of criticism was hitting him, and his place in the industry was in jeopardy. At that moment, as everything was crumbling around him, he began to think of those he had worked with and those he had rejected. He remembered the black actress he had driven away without giving her a chance to showcase her abilities. His mind flashed back to the moments when he had looked at her portfolio and stubbornly refused to see her talent. He remembered her eyes full of hope when she walked into his office, and how that feeling turned to bitterness when he dismissed her. But at the same second, another thought came to him. As much as he tried to avoid it, he realized that perhaps his problem was deeper than just racism. He had always strived for the perfect image that he himself had created, and it had put pressure on his decision. But now he realized that underneath the pressure were his own fears and prejudices. Suddenly, one of the producers entered the office, accompanied by a young man with an energy that recalled greatness. He was a famous director, the father of the very actress whom the casting director had so brazenly rejected. He looked confident and commanding, as if he knew what he was going to do with it, and that in itself made the casting director fearful. "What's going on here? Why do I have letters of complaint on my desk?" the casting director asked, his voice loud and full of determination. The casting director, knowing he had fallen into a trap, blanched. He had no excuse, and there seemed to be no way to dodge the truth. "I don't know what you're talking about," he tried to reply, but his voice shook. The director stepped closer and looked him in the eye. "Really, I can see your career crumbling, and how your own mistakes are starting to catch up with you. You thought you could dismiss people with impunity, based on bias and racism." The casting director finally realized that his actions had not gone unpunished, and that he was no longer in the safe zone of his arrogance. In that moment, he remembered how his daughter had been treated, how her talent had been ignored, and how he himself had become hostage to his own limitations. The director continued, "You suspended my daughter without giving her a chance to show her potential. And you know what? I'm not taking your side. I will make sure that everyone who is confronted you hears the truth. I will not allow you to destroy the dreams of others like you did to her." At that moment, The casting director felt the ground slipping from under his feet. He knew that if the director revealed the truth about his working methods, his career would be over. He could have tried to explain his actions, but he realized that no words would help. The casting director, full of fear and confusion, tried to find a way to justify himself, but the words wouldn't come. Thoughts flashed through his mind of how his bias had led to the destruction of not only the actress' life, but also his own career. He realized that every time he rejected actors who didn't fit his ideal, he was not only denying them a chance, but also denying himself the opportunity to see real talent. Now he felt he could lose everything: his job, his reputation, and perhaps even respect in the industry. Fear gripped him, and he knew that eventually he would have to answer for his actions. That same evening, the casting director received a call from his bosses. He was summoned to a meeting, and he knew it would not be an easy conversation. With every step, he felt the pressure building. The full weight of his preconceptions fell on his shoulders. He realized that change was inevitable, and that his treatment of actors, especially those who didn't meet his standards, would no longer be accepted as the norm. When he entered the conference room, his colleagues were waiting for him. The look in each of their eyes was full of condemnation, and he realized that he was now going to have to face the consequences of his actions. This wasn't just a matter of personal reputation, it was a matter of his career and possibly his future in the industry. Meanwhile, the protagonist, upon learning of the director's visit to the casting director, felt a spark of hope ignite inside her. She knew that this turn could be the beginning of the end of the bias she had been facing. Everything she had experienced began to take on new meaning. The struggle and activism was beginning to pay off. She contacted the other actresses, and they were eager to see how things would unfold. This situation was proof that their efforts were not in vain. Now they could finally see how their actions, their courage and determination could impact an industry where bias had long been the norm. A light was lit in her eyes, the light of hope that change was coming. Though the struggle had been long, she knew that now it was not just her own doing. It had become a movement that could not be stopped. The casting director Saturday in the huge, cold conference room, his hands nervously rubbing the edges of his desk. Every second felt like an eternity, and he had no choice but to wait to be summoned to speak. Thoughts of his actions swirled around in his head like a whirlwind. He could feel his arrogance and prejudice beginning to crack at the seams. A real storm was brewing inside him. All his life he had perceived himself as the one who decided who was worthy of attention and who was not. But now, when he thought of the black actress he had driven away, he suddenly saw her in a new light. She wasn't just an actress, she was the daughter of a famous director, and that knowledge seemed to bring him to his knees. His previous views on race and talent began to look not only outdated, but profoundly wrong. Here, in this hall full of people who looked at him with judgment, he realized that he could no longer stay in his shell of arrogance. Suddenly he felt his heart filled with fear. He had to not only justify his actions, but also change his point of view if he wanted to save his career. At that moment, the chief producer, a woman with bright eyes and a stern expression, walked in. She looked at him as if she could read his mind. Panic erupted inside him. He knew she knew the stories of actresses who had faced his bias, and she was one of those who was willing to stand up to him. "We're here to talk about your behavior at casting calls," she began, her voice sounding confident and with a sense of authority in it. "Your reputation as a casting director is already in jeopardy. We've received numerous complaints from actors and producers. This has become more than just a matter of personal responsibility, it's a threat to our entire studio." The casting director felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He knew that this conversation was only the beginning. "I didn't mean to offend anyone," he muttered, but he realized his words sounded weak. The producer folded her arms across her chest and continued, "Do you realize that your behavior directly affects people's lives? You've been dismissing talent, not giving chances to those who don't fit your ideal, and that is unacceptable. You've denied opportunities to many actors, including the girl we're talking about now." He felt his arrogance, which had long protected him from criticism, cracking at the seams. A realization matured inside him that perhaps he had never understood the true value of diversity. He tried to find excuses for his actions, but his mind refused to accept them. Every casting decision he made now seemed wrong, and he began to see his bias reflected in his own life. "I looked at her and saw no talent. I was blind to what she had to offer," he uttered, his voice shaking with internal struggle. The producer nodded, seeing his confusion. So what now? She asked, her tone full of anticipation. The casting director suddenly realized he had a chance to make a difference. I want to correct my mistakes. I want to meet her, talk to her, and offer her an audition again, he said, his voice becoming more confident. But fear still Saturday in his heart. What if she didn't accept his apology? What if his changes would be perceived as manipulation? A few minutes passed before the producer replied, I can't promise she'll agree, but if you really want change, you'll need to demonstrate it not only to her, but to the entire industry community. You have to be willing to fight bias and work on yourself. Otherwise, you won't stay in this industry. It was exactly what he'd been dreading working on himself. It was as if suddenly all his fears and insecurities had come crashing down on him. He knew it would be a difficult journey, full of inner conflict and discovery, but he couldn't help but try. He was willing to risk it for the opportunity to change not only his life, but the lives of others. When the producer left the room, he was alone, surrounded by silence and his own confusion. On his desk were papers with the stories of the actresses he had rejected, and now they seemed to him something much more than mere complaints. They were evidence of his injustice and bias that demanded to be recognized. Gathering his thoughts, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. The protagonist's voice sounded uncertain when she answered. I'd like to meet you, he uttered, feeling inner confusion mingle with determination. She blanched for a moment, not knowing how to respond. Why? She asked, her voice full of disbelief. I want to apologize. I want to offer you an audition for a role. I realize it may seem insincere, but I want to change my attitude toward you and all the other actors. I want to do everything I can to right my wrongs, he mumbled, feeling the words come out of his mouth on their own. Despite her confusion, there was a note of curiosity in her voice. Okay, where and when? He felt his heart beat faster. This was a chance to do something he'd been avoiding for so long. He'd set up a meeting at a small cafe where they could discuss things calmly and without pressure. When he hung up the phone, he was overcome with a sense of lightness. It was his first victory in a long struggle against his own biases. He knew it would be a long road, but he was ready for a change. In that moment, he realized that perhaps this meeting would start a new chapter not only for him, but for the entire industry, where equality and diversity would be the foundation of success. Now, as he thought about his encounter with the actress, he couldn't escape the thought that this wasn't just business. This was his opportunity to atone for his sins and perhaps inspire others to do the same. He realized that change starts with him, and this was the greatest step towards freedom from prejudice. While waiting to meet the actress, the casting director finally realized how deeply rooted his beliefs were. He Saturday at the table in the cafe, nervously thumbing through the menu, even though he had long ago known he wasn't going to order anything. With every minute of waiting, his anxiety grew. Two contradictory feelings struggled in his mind: the desire to correct his mistakes and the fear that his efforts would not be taken seriously. When the door of the cafe opened and the protagonist walked in, he frowned for a moment. She looked confident, but there was distrust and caution in her eyes. She walked over to the table and Saturday across from him, her arms crossed over her chest, a gesture that spoke of protection and wariness. Thank you for coming, he said, trying to remain calm, though everything was boiling inside him. She was silent, studying him. You wanted to talk? She asked, her voice cold and direct. Yes, he began, but quickly realized that his words didn't sound the way he wanted them to. He needed more than an apology. I want to explain myself. I know I made a mistake, and I want you to understand that it had nothing to do with you, but with my own preconceived notions, he said, but the old habit of making excuses was still fermenting inside him. She raised an eyebrow, clearly not satisfied with his answer. Nothing to do with me. You chased me away because of the way I look. That's what bias is. Images of the actresses he had rejected surfaced in his mind. He realized his words sounded hollow, and in an attempt to save face, he continued, I was under industry pressure. Everyone expects a casting director to follow certain standards. I had to meet the expectations. Standards. Her voice was full of contempt. That's just another attempt to justify your actions. Standards that are based on racism have no place in our society. He felt a wave of shame come over him, but the old confidence still roamed in his head. But you do realize I'm not the only one. The same goes for everyone in the industry. I was only doing what was expected of me, he uttered, trying to find a footing in his words. She smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. Yes, that's exactly right. You're just one of many who don't want to take responsibility for your actions. You can talk about it, but your inner racism speaks louder. At that moment, the casting director felt his arrogance begin to crumble. He tried to find words to defend his point of view, but they seemed to stick in his throat. He realized that this meeting was his last chance to change something in his attitude, but old habits were strong. I didn't know how you would react to that. You must realize that I need to think about my career, he said, feeling his words sounding like excuses again. Your fears don't matter if you keep destroying other people's dreams, she replied sharply. You just can't get rid of your biases. You don't want to see the diversity brings strength and talent that goes beyond your norm. The casting director felt himself feverish with tension. It was hard for him to accept her words, but deep down he knew she was right. All his beliefs, all his ideals now seemed fragile and untrue. He tried to imagine what it would be like to live in a world where prejudice and racism determined your fate, but his mind still held the old stereotypes. I just wanted it to be a successful project, he said bitterly, but immediately realized how inappropriate it sounded. But I realized that doesn't excuse me. She looked at him in disbelief. This isn't just a project. These are lives. It's my life and the lives of other actresses who have been rejected. You think your one choice might mean nothing, but it means everything. Many faces popped up in his mind again, the actresses who had come to the audition, many of whom had lost hope because of his bias. It felt guilt overwhelm him, and it was a real shock to him. You're right. I was blind, he finally uttered, his voice sounding weak. I was an egotist who thought only of myself and my career ambitions. She didn't answer, but there was a glimmer of hope in her gaze. The casting director realized he had to act. He had to take responsibility not only to her, but to everyone he'd ever rejected. I want to right my wrongs, he said, trying to speak from the heart. I know it's going to be a long road, but I'm ready to start it. I want you to give me a chance, not just to you, but to all the other actresses who have faced similar things. She studied his face, trying to see if he was sincere. Words mean nothing without action. You need to show that to everyone. Explain to your colleagues that this behavior will not be tolerated. He nodded, realizing it was his responsibility. I will do my best to change my reputation. I will fight for justice and for those who have been misrepresented. I realize it's not easy, and not everyone will take me seriously, but I'm willing to start with myself. There was a spark of hope in her eyes again, and it felt like he could find support if he was really honest with himself. I hope you're not just talking, but really ready for a change, she said, and there was confidence in her voice. The casting director nodded, feeling himself becoming more and more free of his old preconceptions with each word. He knew he would have to work on himself, but it was a start, and he was ready for it. With that thought, he let go of his former life of selfishness and prejudice, and looked forward to the future not only for himself, but for everyone who had ever faced the same problems. The actress stood in front of the mirror in the dressing room, her heart pounding with excitement. She wasn't just going to perform at the casting call. She was going to use her position to raise the issue of bias in the casting process. From this moment on, she wanted her voice to ring out, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever felt unappreciated and misunderstood. This time she was determined. She had two choices: to become a victim of the system again, or to take responsibility and try to change it. The actress chose the second path. After a morning audition that went better than she expected, the actress headed to the casting director. Little did he know that she was ready to take him on. Her confidence was evident in her. Every move and determination was simmering inside her. She entered the office, where he was sitting at his desk, reviewing notes. His face expressed weariness, but he couldn't hide his curiosity. Is something wrong? He asked, not lifting his gaze from the paper. I'd like to talk about what happened at our last casting, she said, her voice sounding firm and confident. He looked up, a look of surprise on his face. I thought you wanted to forget it, he said with a touch of irony, but his tone was no longer arrogant. Do you really think I can just forget? She asked. My experience is not just a random story. It's a reflection of what's going on in our industry. He felt his embarrassment building, but she continued. I realize you have your fears and preconceived notions, but you have to realize that it's not just your perception, but the lives of the actresses who were hoping to get a chance." The casting director was silent, and there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. The actress sensed that this time he was willing to listen. She took a step forward and continued, "Bias not only ruins careers, but also breaks dreams. We live in a society where racial stereotypes shape perceptions. I want to use my position to speak openly about this." He raised an eyebrow. "How are you going to do that?" he asked, not hiding his interest. "I want you to start talking about your mistakes, about your preconceived notions. You have an opportunity to change the industry, to help those who are facing the same things I faced. You need to be open to change." Her words sounded not only like a call, but a challenge. The casting director was deep in thought again, and she noticed his face pale. Images of all the actresses who had come to him for a chance and whom he had rejected simply because they didn't fit his narrow idea of right looks were running through his mind. "I didn't know what I was doing," he admitted, his voice sounding depressed. "This is not just your case. This is a systemic problem," she said. "I want you to be part of the solution, not part of the problem." He looked at her, and there was a spark of understanding in his eyes. "I realize I should have done something. Maybe I should have made my prejudices known to the other casting directors," he said, mulling over every word. "That's right, and you can help not only yourself, but all of us," she replied, full of confidence. The casting director nodded, realizing that she had truly inspired him to make a change. I'm ready to talk openly about what has been happening and continues to happen in the casting process." The actress felt hope stirring in her chest. "If each of us start raising these issues, we can change this world. I don't want others to face what I faced. I want them to be given the opportunity to show their talent, regardless of their race or appearance. I'm really ready to change," he said, and his eyes reflected determination. "I'm going to start with myself, and I'm going to work on helping others understand how bias destroys dreams." The actress nodded with approval, her heart filled with hope when she saw that change was possible even in someone as arrogant as the casting director. This wasn't just a change in one person, it was a step towards changing the entire industry. "Thank you," she said, sincerely. "It's really important, and I hope this will be the start of something bigger." The casting director looked at her with renewed determination. "You inspire me, and I will do my best to change my previous views. I want others to see that each of us is entitled to dreams, and every talent deserves a chance." With those words, they both realized that they had stepped onto the path of change. This was not just a conversation. It was the beginning of a new era in the casting process where bias had no right to exist. The actress stood at the window of her small apartment, looking at the twinkling lights of the city. Night shrouded the streets, but her emotions were stirring in her soul. She realized that the conversation with the casting director had become important. But it wasn't enough. She couldn't just let go of his words and promises. Action had to be taken. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw images of other actresses who, like her, had faced prejudice and racism. Tears in her eyes, humiliated faces that wouldn't leave her alone. "I can't just be silent," she whispered, lifting her head. A spark ignited in her chest, and she knew she had to use her voice to protect those who couldn't stand up for themselves. The next morning, the actress decided to hold a meeting with several other actresses who were also facing the casting director. She knew that by coming together, they could create a powerful front against the bias. She contacted her friends and colleagues and soon gathered them at the cafe where she herself had once experienced humiliation. When everyone gathered, there was a tense atmosphere in the air. Each of them had a story to tell, and the actress knew she had to give them a chance to speak. She raised her hand and, full of determination, said, "Girls, I know we have our fears, but we have to talk about what's going on in our industry. We can't let bias ruin our dreams and careers. Let's stand together against racism." Her words provoked a lively response. Women began to share their stories of auditions where they had faced discrimination, devaluation, and, sometimes, direct insults. One actress she used to work with told how she was kicked out of a casting call because she didn't fit the stereotypical image the casting director had of her. Her voice shook with emotion and everyone present could feel her pain. "We should do something about it," another actress suggested. "Maybe we should create a petition or go to the media. We can come together and make these stories heard." The actress gushed, "Our goal is to change the system. Not just one person. We have the opportunity to impact the industry if we work together." The actresses started sharing ideas. They decided to collect stories, document all the instances of bias they had faced, and create a platform where these stories could be openly discussed. Every time someone shared their painful story, the actress felt her own experience recede into the background, giving way to a common cause. A few days later, they began strategizing. The actress took the initiative to write an open letter in which they were going to talk about their experience and demand changes in the casting process. They decided to send the letter to several major publications to bring attention to the issue. As she worked on the text, the thought of the casting director, who seemed to be just now beginning to realize what his role was in the system, popped into her head, but she knew that his realization was only the beginning. They all needed a real change, not just one person's image enhancement. One evening, after a long day, the actress finished a letter. Her words were full of passion and determination. She described how racism and prejudice can shatter dreams, how important it is to see people not by their looks but by their talent. As she sent the letter, hope sparked in her heart. The next day, their letter became a real sensation. The media quickly picked up the story, and soon the actresses became known as the voice of a new generation who speaks out against racism in the industry. Their words resonated in the hearts of many, and many other actors and actresses began sharing their own stories of bias and discrimination. The actress knew this was just the beginning. Every story, every stand against racism was a step towards change. She felt a spark inside her that inspired others, and realized that the fight for justice was not just a personal cause, but a collective responsibility. With each new day, her determination grew stronger. She knew that the road to change would be long and difficult, but she was ready to go all the way, because she had already started the process of changing the system, and that was what mattered most. A few months later, as the intense days of fighting for justice became part of her new reality, the actress finally got the call that changed everything. Her heart raced when she saw her agent's number on the phone screen. She had received many calls in recent weeks, but this one was special. "You won't believe what I've just found out," she said, trying to remain calm, though her voice treacherously trembled with excitement. "What happened?" the actress asked, feeling her hope begin to fizzle. "You got the part," the agent blurted out, "in a new project by a famous director that you've been dreaming of. They've chosen you for the lead role." Those words filled her with joy and relief. All her efforts, every stand against prejudice, every effort to raise her voice, had not gone in vain. She finally got the chance she had dreamed of, and it was not just a validation of her talent, but a symbol of hope for all those who have ever faced discrimination. As she picked up the phone, she couldn't hold back her tears. Those tears were full of joy and pain mixed together. She felt a sense of responsibility, not only for herself, but also for those who, like her, dreamed of justice in a world where bias sometimes overshadowed talent. The filming of the new project began in a delightful atmosphere. She was greeted with respect and enthusiasm on the set. The director who chose her for the role was aware of her struggles and the biases she faced. He talked about the importance of diversity in movies and how she inspired him to choose her for the role. The actress felt her heart overflow with pride. She wasn't just playing a role. She was a symbol of the changes the industry was facing. There were other actors on the set, many of whom also experienced discrimination. But this project was a place where everyone was accepted for who they were. Every day on set was full of new challenges and emotions. She not only explored her character, but also brought her own experiences and passion to it. The director often approached her, marveling at her unique take on the role. "You really bring something special to the table," he said. "This is a story that needs to be heard, and you help bring it to the audience." Over time, the actress had a small but close-knit circle of like-minded people. They spent evenings discussing their dreams and worries, sharing impressions from the shoot and supporting each other. Each new date became a place where they could talk openly about their fears and hopes, as well as the importance of the work they were doing. By the time filming came to an end, the actress felt not only herself but the whole team had changed. There was a new atmosphere of respect and understanding, and everyone realized that they were part of something bigger than just a movie. It was a real revolution, slowly but surely changing the industry. With the release of the movie in theaters came the moment which she was looking forward to. At the premiere, the hall was full of people, and the actress felt the excitement covering her head, the glow of camera flashes, the hum of voices, and a sense of anticipation hung in the air. She knew that this film was not just her personal success, but an opportunity for others to show that racism and prejudice have no right to exist. When the movie started, she held her breath, her heart beating in unison with the music on the screen. Every frame was full of life and emotion, every scene reflecting her own experiences. She saw her character breaking through obstacles, facing difficulties, and finding her strength. At that moment, the actress realized that this film is not just a story about her. It is a story about everyone who struggles to find their place in the world. When the credits began to roll, the hall was filled with applause. The actress felt her heart overflow with pride and joy. She realized that despite all the obstacles, she was able to do something meaningful. This movie was a landmark not only for her career, but also for the entire industry. At the press conference after the premiere, she was asked about the significance of the movie and her role in it. She smiled demurely and said, "This movie is the voice of those who never had the opportunity to be heard. I am proud to have been able to play this role, and I hope it inspires many others to continue the fight for justice." Her words sounded like a mantra. The actress realized that this was just the beginning. She was ready to continue her fight, inspiring others to follow their dreams and stay on the path to justice. Her dreams were now part of a much larger movement, and it filled her with a power that she was going to use to change the world around her. A few weeks after the successful release of the movie, the actress was in the spotlight. Her story went viral on social media and became a topic of discussion on television and in the news. Every day, letters came in from fans, colleagues, and strangers sharing their experiences and expressing support. She received many thank yous from people who admitted that her story inspired them to keep fighting for their dreams despite the obstacles. But amidst this attention, it was important for the actress to remember that her personal success was only part of a bigger picture. As someone who has faced bias, she realized that her achievements could not be the ultimate goal, but only the beginning of a larger mission. She decided to use her platform to speak out about the issues of discrimination and bias in the film industry. First, she organized a series of panel discussions to which she invited other actors and film professionals to discuss the importance of diversity and inclusion. At one such meeting at a local theater packed with audience members, she took the floor again. Our industry should be a reflection of our society. We need to see diversity not only on screen, but beyond. Each and every one of us deserves a chance to succeed, regardless of color, gender, or background. Her words were inspiring. The audience, who previously could only dream of a career in movies, now felt that their voice mattered too. There were young actresses in the audience, starting their careers, who looked at her with admiration. The actress knew that her mission was not only to talk about her own experiences, but also to support others by helping them find their paths in the industry. The next step was even more ambitious. She decided to create a support fund for talented actors from disadvantaged backgrounds. The fund would provide scholarships for acting training, fund auditions, and help young artists find their first roles. "We need to give those who may never get a chance, she said at a meeting with potential funders. Watching her idea begin to materialize, the actress felt that her legacy of change was just beginning. She attracted the attention of well-known producers and actors who agreed to support her initiative. Each new alliance, each new endorsement gave her confidence that she was moving in the right direction. At the Golden Globe Awards, in which she participated as a guest star, the actress decided to make an important statement. In the middle of her acceptance speech, she addressed the audience. "Every time we see talent go unnoticed because of bias, we lose some of our wealth as an industry. We have to fight this so that new generations of artists can proudly walk on stage and press their stories. We must create a world where no one is left in the shadows because their skin color or gender doesn't meet established standards." Her words drew applause, and many in the audience began to stand up in support of her speech. This moment was a symbol of change, when the cry for justice and equality was louder than ever. Gradually, her foundation began to grow, and new actors came to auditions with support that previously seemed unattainable. Over time, the successes of these young artists became truly inspiring. Some of them started winning awards, and all of them never forgot to talk about how the actress changed their lives and gave them the opportunity to be heard. With each new project and each new movie, Her influence in the industry grew bigger and bigger. Casting directors began to rethink their approaches to casting, realizing that they couldn't ignore the talent that was showing up on their doorstep. Actresses and actors with different backgrounds and experiences became more visible on screen, and audiences finally began to see the diversity that had been talked about for so long. The actress continued to work, grow her foundation, and advocate for equality in the industry. Each new victory inspired her to move forward. She realized that this was not only a personal victory, but also a victory for the entire industry, which was beginning to realize how important it was to be open to diversity. One day, at a meeting with young actors, she saw them sharing their dreams and hopes. The fire she had once felt burned in their eyes, and it became clear to her that her legacy was not just her story, but an entire movement that continues to grow. "When I started, I didn't have anyone to support me," she told them, "but now we have each other. We can create a community to inspire and support each other. We are a force that can change the world, and every effort you make makes a difference." Her words again drew a round of applause. She knew it was time to pass the baton to new generations who would fight for their dreams, and perhaps one day they would be the ones to inspire others. A feeling grew in her heart that the change she had initiated would continue, and she would do everything she could to ensure that this legacy of change would be everlasting.